Well, I'll tell you how we got here, and I don't think it was by accident. This is a talk I'm starting to give about the weaponization of medicine. And what happened is, during the Obama era and we got Obamacare, one of the things it really did was it corralled physicians into a pen because it made it so almost impossible to, I mean, I used to be in private practice. I had 7 employees. I was doing spine surgery every day. And it was all in, I worked in a hospital. I mean, I went up there, but they didn't pay me. I was all independent. So I wasn't under their thumb in the sense that they could order me around. I mean, I had to meet certain criteria, but you know what it is when you're in a hospital, but not of the hospital. Well, what has happened through the Accountable Care Act is that the hospitals have bought out these practices and very few doctors are independent now. So we have a situation where, and this is what I figured out just recently, what has happened unbeknownst to us is that over a period of time, and I say this to people. I had the honor of having fallen asleep right in front of Tony Fauci when I was an intern in medicine in a room with 4 people. So needless to say, I didn't get an immunology fellowship, but anyway, but Tony Fauci is the key to this whole thing. The reason he didn't get fired is he is like the deep state's biggest asset. So what they've been doing is all these Gates Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation, all these different foundations, through Bill Gates, they funneled money into the NIH across the desk of Tony Fauci. He had $500 billion given to him just for HIV and another $300 billion for miscellaneous stuff that he could use. And he funded all this research and all these things. But along the way, all the corona research, he's funded the Wuhan lab. He literally funded PLA virologist Dr. Xi to come to our bioweapons lab at USAMRIID and do research on virus on Marburg. That's insane. But he's been doing all this, and we didn't pick up that the centralization of power of this one person at the NIH, through his funding, he's got all these university hospitals controlled. Huge money, all these university hospitals depend on NIH funding now. And he's at the heart of that. And he's got a Rolodex and a long arm. He can jerk your money if you don't say what they want. So unfortunately, we're in a situation now where all the doctors work for these hospitals. And so you've got 3 tiers of doctors in these big hospitals. You've got the administrative guys that took the money, the leaders and all that stuff. And, I think if they're not psychopaths, they've sold their souls over this. Because if they're not reading the literature and they're not appreciating that we can treat these things and save people's lives, and if they don't realize that, I found out the hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine thing, these lysosomotropic agents, they go back to 1974. So we stifled the ability to save people from viral illness, whether we're talking flu or not. Every year they told us, take your flu vaccine because 60,000 people died. Well, it wasn't of flu, but it was of influenza. I'll give it was a virus, influenza-like illness. We could have maybe saved them because we've had a possibility of treatment and they stifled it, suppressed it for all these years. So there are doctors at the top of academic medicine that must have known this. And then below them, way down on the bottom, are people like my son, actually, who's still in training, and they can't speak out. They're stuck. I hear from medical students, you probably do too, medical students, residents that are very sad about the moral quagmire they see their profession going into, but they can't really do anything about it. They're too low on the level. But then you've got this big middle ground, and these are the people I think you're really talking about. That big middle segment are doctors who they're out of training, but they work for hospitals. And the hospitals are either academic hospitals that are bought by the NIH directly, or they're smaller hospitals that are bought through group purchasing organizations with the same kind of restrictions. And if they speak, they can lose their job, like I did. I mean, they can, and I never tried to drag my hospital into it, but I'm sure that was how the contract got terminated. It puts you on the firing line. And so what happens is you're afraid to talk because you got a spouse, you got kids, you got a mortgage, and you don't want to do that. Now, I gave them a pass for a while because I admit we were censored so much about treatment, about ivermectin, all these things we could do, that it's possible they really didn't know. But I'm not giving them a pass anymore. At some point, guys, if you don't read the literature, if you don't pay attention, if you don't follow the censorship, realize what you don't know. The key is to understand what you're not being told by the powers that want you to do other things. You're not morally exempt anymore. And this is you know, you become your parents no matter what. You try to avoid that sometimes. My father was a physician, and he couldn't go to World War II because of a medical condition, but he was he was a student of the German doctors, of what happened and how they went so bad over that period of time. And I kind of took that on, and I started reading about Karl Brandt, who, like me, was an orthopedic, but kind of, they didn't call him orthopedic surgeons then, but he was a spine surgeon and trauma doctor. But he was Hitler's surgeon. Dr. Brandt didn't kill anybody directly. He was a really good guy, actually, who was a very good surgeon and really saved a lot of lives. But he was hung at the gallows at Nuremberg, and he was hung for crimes against humanity. And what was his crime? His crime was that he oversaw, he was the titular head of the experimentation that took place in the death camps. And so what he actually got hung for was allowing those people to be experimented on without informed consent and under coercion.
Wow.
And think about what was, yes. And the point I'm making is that is what's happening today.
Oh.
Those doctors, our medical profession is not only allowing people, but they're recommending that people be experimented on. These are experimental genetic agents that were being given. They're recommending that patients go be involved in an experiment without informed consent. You know, the informed consent that I hear from people is they just said, roll up your sleeve. That's not informed consent. And I don't think it's crazy to suggest, you know, the Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations said it is illegal to force or coerce anybody to take part of an experiment. You must have the ability to opt out. And what are we hearing? Oh, well, you won't be able to fly. You won't be able to work in the hospital. You won't be able to have a job, maybe next buy groceries. I mean, that's coercion. So we have a whole society doing what we tried the Nazi doctors for. And I'm just saying that is not an exaggeration. At some point, there were a lot of good guys. We take away the wrong lessons from Germany. By picturing those guys all as monsters, we think, well, we're not monsters, so we can't be guilty like that. Those were everyday guys just like us. They were doctors just like us. They were once idealistic medical students just like us. But they didn't get off the bus when they should have. They rode the bus over the cliff. And I would say that right now it's time to get off the bus. You got to choose a side right now. Either you're going to speak for your patients or you're going to speak for these psychopaths that run the government and our pharmaceutical industry. There's nothing in between. I may sound harsh, but I think that's where we are.